I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here. Glad to have you along today as well. Today is Friday, September 29th, one day after my brother Wayne's birthday. Happy birthday, Wayne McFarlane of Ipso Facto. And today's the day we do our healing circle. Pleased to always be in the company of, in the presence of Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya. She's our leader. She leads the African American Child Wellness Institute. She is the principal at Braken's Psychological Consulting Services, Inc., and has joined me in developing a team of people to talk about health, whole body health, mental health, about therapy. And so we're going to continue that today. Dr. B, first of all, good afternoon. And once again, welcome back to the Healing Circle and the conversation. Today, a special one because we also include, following this live stream, the special recovery room. How you doing, sister?
I'm fine, my brother. It's good to see you. Bye-bye.
Good to see you.
So today, as we start thinking about our health and our overall wellness, we want to just introduce the audience to our way of being. We engage every Friday in a special ritual and a special process called the Healing Circle. And our virtual Healing Circle represents the rituals that are used by African people for thousands of years. And that is to enjoy each other's company, conversations, and power in a shared similar fashion by forming a circle. And in the circle, everyone is equal. They have equal access. They have equal power and voice. And the circle is always initiated by an elder that tells us it's time. So, Baba Al, you're telling us it's time.
It's time.
And so, as we join in this circle, even though we may not be in the same room and we may be joining each other virtually, I'd like for us to think of that everyone shares that power and we all have the power of our voice. And to keep our circle in the spiritual nature, we sit in here in honor of our elders. So those are the shoulders that each of us stand on. So we honor the elders in circle. And we honor our elders because they are closest to our ancestors. And we honor our ancestors because they are closest to our Creator. In this sacred space, we have order and everyone can have voice because we pass a talking stick. And although we're not in a room together, our virtual talking stick is the way that we engage as African people in an orderly way. So the stick goes to each person in circle, and you may pass it to someone else who asked for it. If people get a hankering that they need to say something, the talking stick goes to them. So right now, as we welcome everyone to this stick, with the talking stick and to this circle, I'd ask us to also just take a moment to breathe and acknowledge the power of this moment. This moment is now. This moment is present. Behind us is the past. Ahead of us is the future. The gift of now is the present. And in this space, may we honor the shoulders we stand on and the future shoulders of future people who stand on our shoulders. And may we honor the topic of COVID and long COVID by honoring those we have lost, those who need to learn, and those who are our future. And with this process, we say Ashe, Ashe. Thank you to all our elders and to our Creator. I pass the stick.
Ashe. Ashe. Well, let's bring in our colleague and sister, Dr. Shirlynn LaChapelle. Dr. Shirlynn, not Dr. Shirlynn, but Sister Shirlynn, doctor to me, right, in respect. Shirlynn, how you doing?
I am blessed and highly favored, and on this side of the dirt, okay?
Yeah.
After my birthday turning, you know what?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, let me ask you to give your credentials because I referred to you as doctor and I don't want to misrepresent, and you don't
Thank you.
either.
I
So
appreciate
let's
that.
take a minute to talk about who you are, Sister Shirlynn, and the range of knowledge and experience that you bring to this conversation, and it's the work you do every day.
Well, I've been a nurse for 50 years, a nurse practitioner for
You said
40,
you said
general
50,
surgery.
15 years.
50, 50. Oh, you being funny.
There
Uh,
you go.
and then a psychiatric nurse practitioner, licensed since 2021. I had my license. So I've been around the block, and cardiovascular, diabetes, intensive care, emergency medicine are my specialties, including neurosurgery, and now psych.
Hmm. And at this point, what's on your mind in your daily work as we as community are sort of finding ourselves both coming out of COVID as a pandemic, but also experiencing its presence and other consequences? What are you observing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
I'm observing people who, and these are people I've talked to who had their immunizations. They're a little disgruntled, disheartened because they got COVID. But the key here is you got COVID and you were not in the hospital. You didn't have to go to the ICU. Dr. Stan Shanling, I just got off the phone with him. He was a supervisor over the COVID program for MDH, who's retired now. And he told me he had COVID for 2 weeks. I said, wow. He said, yes. He said, and I'm doing well, and I'm here in California on vacation with my wife because I had all my immunizations. So I'm thankful for that because it could have been much worse, much worse.
Let's sit in that for a second. What does it mean? So I have been fortunate. Bobby, my wife, and I have been fortunate. Number one, we followed all the protocols from the very beginning, and we kind of went, uh, overboard just by being very, very careful with family, friends, even grandkids who we had access to, and always masking and getting the shots as soon as we could. We were early, and so as a consequence, thank goodness neither of us have experienced being sick with COVID-19. And so we're both getting out more now, getting back and having people around a little more. And is there a false confidence that could be a threat to me or someone like me? And I raise that because you said that your doctor you just talked about is just now getting COVID, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he's been at the center of the healing process. So how do people like Al and Bobby both integrate and resume normalcy, but also be mindful and conscious and try to keep themselves protected? Because we're both, in our mid 70s, and we both have compromises that we want to make sure that we don't expose. What are your thoughts? What do we do?
Well, to err on the side of safety and conservatism, wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new variant out there. It's a B105 something variant. Now, from the CDC, basically the immunizations we have taken had some mild protections over that, which meaning hopefully we wouldn't be killed by it. So it would lessen the impact. Now they've released a new vaccine, but much like the flu vaccine, they do everything they can to try to include those elements of the virus that they have, but
Mm-hmm.
there's never 100%.
Right.
So I think it was released this week, and I'm going to get my shot next week, including my flu shot, because I don't want people to forget that flu kills and has killed many every year.
Mm-hmm.
And COVID is a far worse enemy than flu ever was. So we must not discount it. And I know I have met so many professionals who said they weren't taking it. And I'm thinking, wow, I just don't believe in it. I just don't. And, you know, the sad part, the young man who was going to be on this show was one of those people who didn't believe in it. He didn't think he needed it, and I'm not doing it. And he didn't. And he ended up catching COVID. His wife called 911. They had to resuscitate him. His heart stopped in the ambulance. When they took him to North, his heart stopped again. His wife wanted him transferred to the U of M where she works. They put him on the thumper, the thing that keeps pumping your chest for CPR. And when they got him there, they put him on ECMO. That's bypass, basically, where it oxygenates your blood. And then they put a balloon pump in, which takes over the work of the heart. And to be kind, they put him in a propofol coma. So when I chatted with him, he said, I don't remember anything other than when I was at home. And thank God. And he was in for some months in the ICU. Had to learn how to walk again, kind of speak, because that tube been for so long. He had occupational and physical therapy. So this stuff is not playing with us. It really is not. And they said it's a miracle that he's alive, because basically they said you died several times. We had to bring you back. It's no plaything.
So the question began with, you know, like him and other people, how do we, so you said wearing a mask is one thing we should do, just be masked still.
Protect yourself.
Yeah, protect
that
yourself.
helps protect you from the virus, the flu virus.
You know,
I've been feeling safe too.
I went to a meeting with one of my customers a couple of days ago, you know, kind of things I used to do all the time, but I haven't done a lot in the past. I haven't done any of it in the past several years, but I started to do it again. And, you know, I felt myself surprised and a little alarmed, and I didn't wear a mask that day, that morning. And what I noticed, though, was that how close people get when they're talking. You know, I mean, and you know, I'm sitting there saying, hold it, wait. You know, I can hear you, but people be leaning in and talking to you and almost, you know, so that scares me. So Dr. B, how do I protect my sanity? And how do I become not overwhelmed by, you know, fear and paralysis, but also be responsible and, you know, proactive, as Shirlynn is saying, by being following protocols?
Yeah, I think putting on a mask, that behavioral adjustment is really important. I know I've had some doctor visits lately. I went to the clinic. Nobody was wearing a mask, the doctor either, or the nurses or any of them, but it was so crowded in there. I got the mask. I put it on. My husband put his on. And a little bit later, I saw 2 or 3 other people put one on. But you've got to be proactive. And I think people are, when they start leaning in, they're trying to tell you more and they're excited. But one of the things that, you know, happens, the closer they get to you, they can literally just spread any kind of germs, that all of that that flies out of their mouth, and the shedding on the body. So I think the best way is to have assertiveness skills and say, you know, I want to hear you, but I can hear you from this distance, because you know, using my own personality, I say, honey, I don't know where you've been. I love you. I don't know where you've been, but you might be having COVID germs. So let's keep our distance. Neither one of us want to be sick. So I use myself humorously, and I'll tell people to step on back. So, and if they don't, you just go on and step back. They'll notice you're getting further and further away from them, and that they'll pick up the hint maybe. But I think it's important to just be very serious and also have fun, but tell people to, you know, that you need a little space, and don't be leery at all. Even if you're the only one wearing your mask, then you know what can happen is that leadership may lead other people to put it on. Just don't put yourself in that position. Yeah, that's and I think psychologically, it's terrible to be afraid and you have no action that you can take that will reduce your fear. So now going back to even keeping your own mask with you and feeling like you have some efficacy over it yourself, that you have the power to make a difference in your own life and that of others. That modeling, that social modeling, will also make other people feel safer putting it on. And it's getting close to cold and flu season, and it's you don't want to catch the flu and you don't want to catch COVID.
Right,
That's my answer.
I got my flu shot. Bobby and I got flu shots last week, but we're waiting for the next COVID shot that is supposed to be out hopefully in the next few days, right, Shirley?
Yeah, it might even be out now.
Okay.
And we qualify because we're so young.
Right, right. We're in the right age group, right? And so how do you see the community reacting? What I talked about was me being in a meeting, and what I noticed was that, everybody is generally mask off, hands down, right? Guard down.
Yep.
And what will happen that will cause a reversal or to have us be more mindful? I think the advice you just gave me, wear my mask, is great advice, and I have to just be more intentional. I have remembered getting out of the car and walking into a store, and I just forgot to put it on. I had it in the car, but usually when I got to the store and saw other people with their mask, I went back and got mine out of my car or asked the store if they had one. And then, but more and more lately, when I go to Costco, places like that, more and more people are not wearing masks.
Right.
But I still want to keep myself reminded to wear mine. And I also try to always wipe the carts with disinfectant. I'll keep my hands, clean or disinfected as often as I can. And I'm careful touching, stuff. And then washing hands at home often anyway, when you handle stuff, whatever, But, how do we get to where, how do we not allow ourselves and community to act like it's over? What do we need to do to make sure that people keep reminded and keep investing in behaviors that are going to keep us safe and keep us well? Shirlynn, what do you think?
I think sometimes the only thing we can do is model the behavior. And when people ask us, why are you wearing that mask? That's when we choose that time to try to impart some valuable information, honest information, that although we've been immunized against it, the virus is still out here. It's as virulent or strong and dangerous as ever. And it's always changing. And when you hear they have variants, that means it has mutated into some other thing that maybe our immunization may not cover, and that we should never get comfortable, because when we get comfortable and are not protecting ourselves, it's like unprotected sex. You hope you don't get pregnant, but then again, don't be surprised. You like that one?
I love that analogy. That is so true. And I might add, if we could go a little bit deeper following that analogy, it may feel good for a minute, but it can kill you. So you just
and I find making it funny. People remember.
I'm telling you, they gotta remember it, because it is not worth it's not worth the risk.
Right.
It's not worth the risk for yourself or other people around you. And I always tell people that, and what I've been doing is just reminding people that it's cold and flu season. And that is like my my foundation from which I can bounce off into talking about being safe, because it's cold and flu season. And just like we said earlier, people are still dying from the flu, but at least you can, if you get sick, you don't have to have COVID. You can prevent it by as much as possible by being safe. And I really like that idea, Shirley, and especially when you're talking to people about getting pregnant. So I think that's a good analogy. And others, just about making sure that you don't harm other people you love.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that mental health providers are doing is we are revisiting COVID. We're re-educating people about COVID. And as part of our assessment, when we're talking to people about stress now, since COVID has been so powerful in our Black community, especially, we ask people about grief and loss around COVID and exposure to COVID in the past. And we talk to them about, how they can be safe now because, they've already endured a lot. Some of our community members are dying from fentanyl exposure.
Yeah.
Some of them are dying from COVID. Some of them are dying from diabetes or heart degrees. So behavioral health, teaching us how to change some of our habits and how to be courageous, because the biggest person you have to fight is often yourself.
Mhm.
As seeing that chocolate cake from Cafe Latte, I have to have a discussion with me. Am I going to have a bite, or am I going to have a piece, or the whole thing? So we really have to engage in proactive measures that assure our lives, because we're not just living for ourselves. We have community and family who depend on us, who love us, who we don't want to see them hurting and grieving because we didn't do everything we could to make sure that we're well. So we have a right to wellness. And when we say by any means necessary, that means sometimes we have to fight ourselves. And it's a hard fight. And one of those things we'll be talking about a little bit today, but in the future, just like the guest who we're going to have today, he had to fight himself with his cognitive dissonance or confusion about whether he should take that vaccine. And then having to fight for his life changed his whole belief structure.
Mhm.
He didn't believe in vaccine. He didn't believe in God. He left out believing in both.
Yeah.
So I say to our community, believing about COVID vaccines, it's not a religion. It's a practice, a
Mhm.
behavior that you can choose. You don't have to believe it. Do what you got to do to live. And with that, I'll pass the talking stick to Sister Shirlene, because I know she got something to say about that. She already said amen, so I know she's on board.
All I got to say is it's too late after you get it, as many people have found out, including the young man who was going to be on this show. And when they started making him lighter, and what we mean by that, decreasing the propofol so he could start to wake up and they could see if they could extubate him soon. And then after he's laying, I had pictures of him in various stages of his ICU experience that he sent me. And he said after he woke up and started to realize what he had gone through and how he was so-called circling around the ring of the toilet about to leave here, he realized that was stupid. And as he would go through physical therapy and occupational, he said that's when he really started to have faith in God and to realize that he is only here because God chose to save him in spite of himself. And that's why he wants to share what he's gone through and to warn people, you don't want to have this happen. Mm-hmm. And I think a friend of ours who passed from COVID, oh God, I'm having a senior moment on his name, who was one of the spokesman recorder.
Mel Reeves. I'm thinking exactly on the same page you are. As you're speaking, that name and that picture of him
in the
right
ICU.
Top of mind.
And he said, don't do it. He said, I didn't believe in it. I didn't take it. And I'm begging you, please get the vaccine. And he died a couple days later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was hospitalized, and they did a memorial for him, or a memorial event over on West Broadway this past weekend, I think, over at Zura. And it was kind of a fundraiser for education, but Black women holding up his work, and his life in praise. But one of the things that he did, exactly as you said early on, he was like, COVID, just another trick. trickeration and don't believe the hype. And he was out there doing what he does. He was an activist, right? And he was at every event, every challenge, he was there, front line, challenging, speaking truth to power, and organizing, mobilizing. And he was just serious about that. That was his life work. And he, felt that that was the most important thing in the world, because it was to him, the freedom and liberation, the revolution that he stood for and wanted to see come about. But in that process, you can deny it if you want to, but if you get it, there's no denying at that point in time. And as you said, towards the end, he told people, you know what, this is serious, and I don't want to leave here without telling you, you need to protect yourself, because I didn't believe. So I give him credit for that. But that's such a waste, because he was a brilliant and talented writer and organizer and a light in the community.
And his last act of liberation was to tell us the truth.
Tell the truth.
Save us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I just wonder how many more stories are there like that in the community, and how do we elevate them, and how do we replace that disinformation-based or lack of information-based thinking and acting with some kind of a process, a system, a protocol that gives us an approach to everything we do, not just COVID-19, COVID being the point of the spear, but COVID also is a reflection of all the other anomalies or other potential, disasters that we can experience, that can be either in the physical, medical, or mental, or in the economic world, the education world. There are all kinds of things, mines and minefields and pitfalls that we face. And so how do we come up with an approach to living, an approach to knowing that allows us to navigate these things with a degree of awareness, consciousness, conscientiousness, and confidence, but that is informed by the reality that these things exist and that they have impact on our lives and our community, but also that there are things we don't know that can beset us as well. How do we? So I guess I'm speaking, Dr. B, to how do we continue to encourage and develop a framework, a state of mind, and maybe we obviously have it already, because we're still here, because as a people we've come through the unimaginable, right, the unthinkable, and the intentional effort to destroy us as a people through slavery and beyond slavery. We've survived that. We've survived their predictions that we would not be here in so many years. We're still here. We're still growing. And so on the one hand, we obviously have reflected and embraced whatever tools were necessary to continue that survival. But at this point, how do we expand, broaden, deepen, and make even more intentional our capacity to understand danger, but also understand our mission and purpose of life? What do you think, Dr. B?
I have a lot of thoughts around that, and thank you for giving me the talking stick. First of all, understanding the concept of post-traumatic growth. So when people experience historical trauma, as we have, and the trauma continues to this day as we experience, there has to be some sense made out of our experience and our conditions. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. Mm-hmm. And that means that we take that condition, we take those multiple complex traumatic experiences, those adverse childhood and adult experiences, and we make meaning of them to propel us in fighting for our lives. Because, we have a saying, what won't kill you will make you stronger. And it's sad that we have to get to the brink of death before we can claim our right to life. But that's what happens in the process of oppression, in the process of mental side, when you have been denied your humanity. At some point, one believes that we don't have a right to be here. One believes that life is supposed to be short and miserable. And so I think there's a two-pronged approach. One is with our babies. As we raise our babies, we need to tell them and give them affirmations of life, that they have a right to life. They have a right to all aspects of life, to physical wellness, financial wellness, emotional wellness, social wellness, spiritual wellness. They have a right to all those forms of wellness, and that it's their duty, responsibility, and power to make those choices that they need for themselves. We start on that end. On the end, on the other, I say it's a bookend end approach. On the other end of those bookends, we have our elders. And honoring our elders and the wisdom they had, even if they had a second grade education, they tell us, girl, you better watch doing XYZ. You better eat some of them roots. You better eat them greens. You better they bring wisdom and common sense to our process. And those who are in between, being the young ones and the elders, those are the middle, those are the books. And each of us have a story to tell, a story to write. And each of those stories need to be about our own personal, individual, and collective resilience, that we make it through. So first, that whole pattern of just thinking of ourselves in a collective manner, not just as individuals, but as a group. I am because we are, and we are because I am. And no piece of that puzzle exists without the other. We are interdependent. I'm not saying codependent, like you hanging on somebody every word and they mean more to you than yourself. I'm saying interdependent, that we need each other. So that mindset is one of self-education, it's one of self-valuing, it's one of denying the narrative of white supremacy, it's one of saying, I have a right to be. My Black life matters. Not just all Black lives matter like a chant. My Black life matters. And I will do what I have to do to make myself well. I will surround myself with people who affirm my right to be well, my right to be here, my genius that has been given to me divinely, whether it's to cook cakes and tend to babies or write dissertations. We all have been given gifts, and we have to be here to live and share them, and that our gifts matter. So I know that's a mouthful to your question, but it's a big theme. We may feel puny, alone, but together we're giants, because we stand on the shoulders of giants who sacrificed for us to have life, have it abundantly, claim it, own it, control it, make decisions that are toward life versus death. If death is in the mix, already use your intelligence to tell you, I ain't ready to die that way. So with that, I give you the stick back, Brother Al.
Thank you, Dr. B. Let's take a break for a second and hear a message, and then we'll come back and go deeper. Are you or someone you know recovering financially from the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown, or any other reason? If so, help is available. Findhelp.org is a site to find a wide range of resources, including food, medical care, and more. The best part is based on your zip code. Visit findhelp.org, enter your zip code and the service you need. You'll get a map directing you to the organizations that can help you. Help is waiting at findhelp.org. If you need help starting anew, findhelp.org is the site for you. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane, Friday, the Healing Circle, always in uh, the great company of Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya and Sister Shirlynn LaChapelle. And we're talking about how we come through not only the COVID-19 and the attendant cold and flu seasons that are coming up, but how do we come through stress and how do we come through trauma? And what is our cultural response? What is our cultural key, our pathway to not only, developing responses that protect us, but how do we turn these processes into these experiences into venues and vehicles for growth, for improvement, and for development? And so I'd like to sort of pose that question. You left us there, Dr. B, with how we convert trauma. I'd like to go deeper into that and maybe give some stories. And I don't know. I had a chance last week to be interviewed by some people from the disability community or differently abled community. And the people have a podcast that they had me come on. They've been listening to us here on this show and listening to my work on KFAI over the years and wanted to interview me about what my understanding was about people that are differently abled or disabled, as they are called. And they wanted to, or just ask me what my sense is and was of how our community and culture respond to the challenge and the needs of people that have quote unquote disabilities, And my response was that what we are developing and what is the genuine nature, from my point of view, of Black community, Black culture, is a nature of inclusivity, that as a cultural definition or reality, our community embraces us however we show up. And we show up in all kinds of ways, right? With different nuanced or abilities, opportunities, etc. And so I bring this up because the question is, how do we develop an approach to life? And you've touched on this, Dr. B, that allows us to be consistent and consistently on the path of life and not on the path of death. You described it that way, I believe. Shirlynn, what do you think? How do you, when you do your work as a healer and educator, you're also an entrepreneur and you're also a political activist, I know that. But as you navigate those different identities and different arenas of work, what do you think it means for us to adapt, adopt, and embrace strategies that keep us healthy and whole, and that also, as you say, model that so that we move forward as a people?
I think it's difficult when you're receiving different messages. You're receiving messages that have no bearing in science. You are also hearing messages from people say, well, I didn't take it, I didn't get it. True. And you're alive until you're dead. So just because you didn't take it and you didn't get COVID yet doesn't mean you won't get it. And it doesn't mean that when you get it, it won't be very damaging to you, where you may have to have a limb cut off because it causes blood to clot abnormally, or you don't have a heart attack, or you don't have long COVID, even though you've gotten better. Now your memory's affected. You can't remember things. I know several people that's happened to. Or there are other things, athletes. You can't no longer run, or you can barely walk because your heart is so damaged. Your lungs, you don't have the lung capacity that you had before getting COVID, and you're in your 20s. So all I can say is that it's very important for us to get the facts across to people so that they understand that COVID is a real killer. If it doesn't kill you, it can maim you. And at any rate, it can hang around, still affecting your body, still causing problems so that you're no longer the person that you once were. And so our hardest part, our most difficult will be to get people to understand that just because you haven't had it, or just because you know somebody who got their immunizations and had it, did they go to the ER? If the answer to that is no, are they walking around and still doing things? The COVID immunization is to save your life. Nothing's 100%. But if it saves your life, that's huge. If it prevents you from having very bad outcomes and complications, that's huge. That's the most we can do with anything. There's nothing perfect. So we have to do what we know is our best chance. We have to err on the side of caution and prevention. So that's what I have to say.
I'm always looking for metaphors in the specific of COVID and general life, because COVID is so clear and so present and has had such an immediate and broad impact on everybody on the planet in the recent year or two. But I want to look at that as an exaggeration or an illuminating of processes that destroy not only the individual but the culture. And I'm stretching a little bit, so help me with this, Shirlynn. I'm trying to figure what's the equational representation of the impact of COVID, something like COVID, and the impact of Jim Crow, or of slavery, dehumanization, and this may not be an equation that can be made. It could just be Al McFarlane trying to stretch for straws somewhere. But I'm looking for the lessons, the parallels, and COVID certainly required the entire world and the nations of the world, and then the communities of the world and families and ultimately individuals to act to stay alive. To act to stay alive. And if you denied, you may have been lucky and not gotten sick. You may have been lucky and not died, but your risk of dying were so great until the nations adopted the protocols, but also developed the vaccines that would mitigate the chance and likelihood for dying. So I think about that as a threat, an existential threat. What are the other cultural, historical, existential threats that we have survived and come through? And what are the lessons we can learn? The lessons about mobilization, the lessons about education, the lessons about protocols, the lessons about training, the lessons about how we relate to each other, the lessons about whether we are islands unto ourselves, or is it true that no man is an island, that we are all connected, and that what affects one at some level or another affects every other one too, the we, us, I paradigm that you talked about, Dr. B. So that's just how I try to look at stuff to see, what the lesson is, what in this story, in this catastrophe. And because I'm convinced that it won't be the last, the question is, how do we continue to learn and assemble and use that knowledge? I think, Dr. B, you talked about this at the beginning. How do we take and create learnings that prepare us to respond to the next challenge, whether it's, from people or from the biosphere, that might not be the intention of an individual aggression, but an opportunistic convergence of biology and place that creates damage for individuals or the ecosphere or for the human life. So I'm just talking, Dr. B, as I talk like this, what do you think? What kind of things come to your mind?
When you do talk like this, I know that you're going deeper and deeper because that's the kind of thinker you are. And you're a very critical thinker and very creative in your thoughts and a great conversationalist. So I'm going to give you those kudos. And you always create these complex scenarios that we need to kind of address. And in this case, I do think about the existential nature of the challenges around us, from the public one where our democracy is being challenged, where women's right to choose what happens to their bodies is being challenged. It's not too far of a leap for Black folks whose bodies were used for capitalism and whose bodies were not owned by themselves to experience some degree of empathy and fear around the reclamation constitutionally of using and controlling someone's body. The other piece, I think, is not just the social cultural one that's political in nature, but there's always this additional threat that comes from medical apartheid and the use of healthy decision making when it comes to our Black bodies, and how the research shows that physicians and those who care for even mental health providers, they take the path of least resistance, and they don't always apply the best practices when it comes to our culture. They don't think of us in that neat way. They think of us as having more ability to sustain pain. So when we're sick or need pain medication, they're likely to give us less and make us have to deal with it in some other kind of way. So the denial of our humanity is a piece of that. So when I think about the issue of what's challenging us today, including COVID, is the realization that we need to educate ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to have forums such as this. So if people don't want to read a book, at least they can hear the facts out loud mm-hmm. from someone else they can trust. We need to see extra ways of sharing information in not so common places that may be considered places to share knowledge. For example, we can share knowledge at the barbershop because eventually everybody's going to go. We share knowledge at the beauty shop. We share knowledge at the doctor's office, at the nail place, where we go, at the dry cleaners, at the laundromat. We need to be able to share knowledge at the grocery store, or wherever we go. There needs to be some way to institutionally create markets for knowledge among us. We used to do it with the beat of a drum. And in that African village, those talking drums would say whether a baby was born or someone died, or there's going to be a big meeting, or there's a lion in the village killing people or taking their sheep. There has always been a way to beat the drum. I see using our Insight newspaper and our podcast in the multiple ways as beating the drum in the modern day world. But there is an idea about being awake that I believe it's the Navajo have a proverb that says, one cannot wake someone who's pretending to be asleep. And we have to stop pretending to be asleep. Because if we don't wake up, our costs, our risk, they're much larger than any other group. Because when America gets the cold, we get the flu. When they get the flu, we get COVID. Mm-hmm. So we got to be aware that we have choices for life. We have choices, and nobody can take those away from us. They may try to build systems that don't allow them or make them easy, but we still have to choose life. And with that, I want to pass the talking stick to Sister Nurse Shirlynn LaChapelle. Shirlynn, you got that talking stick. I know you got something to say.
Well, I do. Well, Al, I am so glad you brought the political realm in, because all politics is local.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens on the local scene when we don't vote, we get people in who work against our best interests. We've got health insurance in this state, thank God, Minnesota Care, and Minnesota is one of the leading states who tries to put in policies because of who we elected that will help others. Now, right now in Memphis, I think it's this week, or is it Monday, they're going to have an election for mayor. And I was reading that Memphis is 65%. Actually, I wasn't reading. I was on, what's the brother who has his own black channel?
Roland Martin. Roland Martin, yep.
And I was listening on there. He says Memphis is 65% black. Yet with the early voting, only 10%. But of the whites, they have like 10 times more that have voted. And this was a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize, they come out and vote for the big elections. That's nice. But without realizing that the aggressor, the white people who are against us, they play a long game. We play a short game, thinking the presidency is the one. They have been voting to take over every legislature, every school board,
yep,
every office that affects our daily lives. And we sit back just not paying attention. And then when things start jumping off that are harmful to us, that they start polluting our neighborhoods. There's a train track that's being put in the Carolinas. And it's a predominantly black area. And the people don't come out and vote. And now they're doing, when the railroad can take over your property, what's it called?
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain on 600 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's breaking up black farms. Yeah. Black communities.
Yeah, but they haven't voted. The legislature can't allow all of this. Yes, the governor has some power, but you're not really voting to elect him either, or her. And then there's a legislature that passes the rules that controls how this can be done to you. We've got to wake up. You're talking about Jim Crow. This is the new Jim Crow for real, because they have figured if we can't win the national, we're going to win everything, all the down races that give us the real power. The Supreme Court just told, Alabama, that their districting to not give the black people there another district so they'd have another congressperson, that they kept drawing these gerrymandered districts, and they did not think the Supreme Court would rule against them. And they just did. So now I think a third party may be the ones who are going to draw up that map. And that would do wonders in Congress, because we'd have another congressperson.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you to pivot, locally here. Not local, but national, but local, buzz on it. It's amazing that Donald Trump is facing 90-some charges in a variety of courts, but the Congress, Republican-led House, is focusing on shutting down the government. That may happen within the next 48 hours if they don't come up with a deal to keep the government going. And the cost of that, the consequence of that will fall on everybody, but particularly people in our community.
Yes.
And people that are first responders, people who are working at the border, government jobs, and people that get services from the government may have their services more difficult to get to. And so how do you explain a Trump popularity, and the audacity of that hardcore group of right-wingers that support him, that control the Republican Party, and the inability of all of the rest of us to move past that and to, prevail? What do you think? I mean, how do you describe it, first of all, Shirlynn?
I describe it as we are still feeling powerless, even though we talk power. We are very powerful if we go and vote. Now, what's going on with Trump? He's dumb but smart. He understands that white supremacy and white fragility, and the understanding that the people who are not doing well at the bottom, the white people at the bottom, they need someone to blame why they are still poor and powerless. And then he tells them, I'm just like you, which we know is a lie. This man is wealthy. And then he gets them hyped up that if you don't want there to be socialized medicine, because they'll get it. You don't want there to be an increase in the hourly wage because they'll get it. Well, we are 15% of the national population and even less in the state of Minnesota. So whatever they'll, which is us, is going to get, so are you. And it could raise you and your children out of poverty. But you would rather cut your own throat to try to make us bleed. Well, let me tell you, we're used to bleeding. We've been bleeding 400 years. And in spite of it all, we survive. But you're still poor. There is a class system and a caste system in America. And if you are uneducated, make below the poverty level, do not have a job that pays a living wage, then, honey, you're not part of the elite. You are poor and forgotten about, and they hope you die. They do not want to pay for the services that people who do not make a certain amount of money need. And when they talk about shutting down the government, Black people, you better vote, because I forget it's at least 35% in this state work government jobs. So the long game for the Republican Party, the long game is to streamline government. In other words, cut government jobs. And the jobs that they plan to cut, you guessed it, are BIPOC jobs. I think it was written somewhere that recently, and Roland Martin touched on that they are going to make jobs. This is going to be more like the Mayor Daley thing, patronage jobs. So in other words, there will be no protections for you just because you've been there forever. We can get rid of anyone and put in our own people. So people wake up. It's time to be woke. It's time to vote. If you don't want to vote for anything else, vote for your own survival.
That's right.
You will soon be not poor, but poor and really messed over. So yes, and the same thing with the school board. The school board here has, and I got to go there, sorry, Dr. B, they gave contracts for mental health to white companies. Now, we already know, and the research shows, but they are not looking at research, that our people need to have Black providers. Everybody needs providers that share their ethnicity, their culture, and their past, their history. Why, oh, why do they have a multi-year contract? And this isn't the first time they gave it to these people, Washington something or whatever. And the community needs to be up in arms. You need to be hitting the street. Al Flowers, get it together. NAACP, all of the community, get out there, because these are your babies that are not getting what they need in order for white folks to make money. And Al, you always say, we got problems, they get rich. And
we get the misery, they get the money. We got to wrap it up right there. Dr. B, let me have you close it with a note on the recovery room.
Okay, well, right now people can join us in the recovery room. I believe the link is on the site somewhere. So I just want to tell people to join us and look forward to seeing them there.
All right. What a rich conversation. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Dr. B. And thank you, Shirlynn. Thank you for listening. I want to make sure that you tell somebody, want to grow our numbers here. So tell somebody, we'll be here again next Friday. And we want to grow this. And you are central to that. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.